we're going to start with Tom on my left, founder and CEO of Hashgraph.
Thank you. Actually, I'm not the founder. I'm the president. The two founders are Dr. Lehman Baird and Mance Harmon, who are both have met 25 years ago working in the Air Force. But Hedera Hashgraph is a base layer consensus algorithm. Think of us as the very bottom of the stack. We are the layer, the trust layer of the internet that we think will enable the next generation of applications to be built.
My name is Henrik von Scheel. I'm best known as the originator of the fourth industrial revolution.
I'm Nino Vojvodic. I'm the co-founder of Ledgerstater, hosting tonight.
My name is Pawczuk, and I lead blockchain for Deloitte.
My name is Ibrahim Huseini. I'm the CEO and founder of FullCycle, a sustainable infrastructure company diversifying, expanding access to investing in sustainable infrastructure.
Hi, John Calian. I lead the Deutsche Telekom Innovation Labs and also co-founded the blockchain group at Deutsche Telekom.
John Abbot. I'm the Director of Business at Yoti, which is your own trusted identity.
Dimitri Andropoulos, founder of Vang Global and a private equity venture firm.
Awesome, thank you. So Dimitri, let's start with you since you're holding the mic. I hear that you were a very early investor in Ripple, and I was wondering if you could speak to a little bit to current applications of blockchain in banking.
Sure. Ripple is a ledger protocol. It's designed primarily to help. It's a little loud in here. It's primarily designed to help. There's the industry. Swift is basically the current platform, and it's a $155 trillion platform a year. That is the problem with it is that it takes longer to fly your money over on an airplane than it is to wire it instantaneously. So Swift is basically a platform that's kind of become antiquated. It's almost 50 years old, and the new platform has become, the de facto platform has become Ripple, and Ripple has raised hundreds of millions of dollars. It's got over 225 banks on the platform today, and what will happen soon, public information, that banks will start announcing that they will phase out Swift. I believe the SEC will determine that it's not a security, and it will determine that it is a central bank digital asset, and really truly become the de facto platform for trading all the world's fiat and cryptocurrencies.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for that response. Out of respect to other speakers, I think I'm going to pause this panel until we can close the door and the staff can stop walking back and forth, and everyone in the back can either stop talking or leave this room to continue their conversations.
They have to hear you in the back, so just tell them.
If you want to continue talking, please leave this room. The panel is stopped until we have quiet in the room. Thank you. And please keep the cappuccino machine off as well. It's only 30 minutes. You can survive without a cappuccino. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move on to the next panelists.
You remind me of my wife.
I hope that was a compliment.
It was.
All right. Tom, let's continue with you. I'd love to hear a little bit more about Hashgraph. It's one of the most hyped up technologies on the market today, particularly because of its new and innovative governance mechanism. Can you tell us a little bit about how that mechanism works?
Sure. I think when we talk about governance, we have to think about first a little bit of context. So I can think of three appropriate governance models that are out in the market. One would be token-based. If you're token-based, it sounds fair, but the more money you have, the more vote you have. Is that what we want? Is that the best way to do it? Maybe, maybe not. The other way to do it is every single individual, every account holder has a vote. If you do that, the main issue is participation. How many people do actually participate? We've had consensus algorithms launched recently where they had single-digit percentage actual participation. That clearly isn't successful. You also can have a foundation. And a foundation sounds great, except who's actually governing that foundation? There's one out there now, a very popular protocol has board of directors that are only on for a year. But who appoints those board of directors? Turns out there's 3 permanent members that appoint those board of directors. Sounds pretty concentrated to me. So what have we designed? We designed a mechanism of 39 global Fortune 100 companies that are diversified by sector, by company, and by geography, and by time. They have a 3-year term capped at 2 consecutive terms. So no one has more than a 2.9% vote, and they're diversified along 4 dimensions. That to me is not perfect, but I don't know a better model out there. And our algorithm is designed, and what we're building is an enterprise-grade ledger that we think should be governed by enterprises, for enterprises, and not for profit. So these enterprises also cannot take dividends and can't pay themselves for doing this. And we want them to be involved, basically to build the best network that they want to use and deploy themselves, and will be deployed in their sectors. And so that's the ethos and the philosophy behind our governance model.
That's awesome, and I think we're all very excited for the launch of your product. I'd like to move over to Linda, if that's okay. So Linda, you're the global blockchain lead for Deloitte, which is a really, really big job, I can imagine. You guys release a very extensive report every year on blockchain uses. What are some of the key findings in that report this year?
So the 2018 report that went out is there's a substantial amount of spend that's happening in blockchain, but we would characterize it more as spend that's still in the experimental stage. What we're already seeing emerge since the 2018 release, which was in June, and our upcoming annual survey will be released this upcoming May, is that we're seeing a shift from, in fact, driven by some fatigue. We characterize clients really falling into 4 camps. The first is the blockchain FOMO effect, which is a lot of experimentation money going in. The fatigue sets in because the focus is too much on technology. The other characteristics of the 2x2 include those digital core and digital shift companies, as well as NextGen. Many of you in the audience, Ripple being a fantastic client, in fact, as well of Deloitte's, where you're looking at disrupting business models in their entirety. And so if you, when you look at the survey findings, some of the corollary data too is to not only the experimentation and the investment, which is relatively on a small scale. We look at what the analyst reports say is blockchain up to 2022 will perhaps be a $12 billion market. I think it's very well understated. But you started this panel off with is there still a place for blockchain? Let me put it this way, including from our data and our survey. Deloitte operates not only from a consulting and technology perspective, but we operate in the tax, the audit, and the assurance side of our business as well. And why is that important? Because back to the point of business model disruption. This is about the Industrial Revolution 4.0. This is about how will business models shift and take advantage of 5G technology through networking, and what is the impact of moving things out of the SWIFT market. And so when we look at this from a business model disruption perspective, we are seeing tremendous investment. We are also seeing tremendous results. This is not just experimentation. One specific example I'll draw on, which you can clearly do a click through to the link of this particular group that was a group formed by themselves, a consortium of some of the largest oil producers in the world, British Petroleum, Chevron, Equinor, Republica, Shell, and others, and formed a consortium which is really focused on post-trading of the commodity, the digitization of post-trade. So let me put it out to you like this. So in all that you've been hearing the last few days at the conference, where we talk about the future of the workforce, we talk about the next digital revolution, we talk about the geopolitical issues of the economy, why wouldn't you bet on something that is actually formulaically, it's about distributed data that has happened years ago that can take, and drive efficiency out of the process. If you're focusing on building the widget, you're going to miss the point here, and that's why we see some of the ebb and flow around this. Our next survey, in fact, one of the key questions I'm asking is for those that have been spending money in the past, are you still spending money this year? Who's already fallen out of the market? Again, missing the point. We see, in particularly one of the significant use cases that we've driven, trade finance. Trade finance doesn't help you very much if it's contained to one geography. Trade finance is about crossing borders. But not only what is the impact of trade finance, but I heard in the previous panel, one of the greatest concerns we have, which is maybe an advocate for cryptocurrency, is fraud, right? In the context of trade finance, in fact, there's one incident in the Asia marketplace that just one single incident cost that particular bank $200 million. And so if we have, through using blockchain technology, and we've instituted actually through the Hong Kong Monetary Authority, a trade finance application that today is already supporting 14 of the largest banks in China and is also migrating to some of the other Asian continents, and we're seeing it actually shift also into the European areas. So in summary, when you look at the problem with blockchain, the great news with open source, the great news with innovation, the great news with many of the panelists up here thinking through what are governance structures and tokenization programs. But it really is essential that you look at the essence of this is not only in the context of what it can be, but what it already is, and driving efficiencies, solving issues around fraud, and of course, the tax elements of this, which becomes super important. We're moving these digital assets, and the location or domicile of that digital asset changing from one geography to another, there are massive tax implications. So that's an important part to consider.
Thank you so much, Nino. That was amazing.
Yeah, let me continue talking about that.
Would you like to introduce yourself first?
I think I already did. Hi, I'm John.
We have some new guests,
no
so it's just helpful.
John Calian from Deutsche Telekom Innovation Labs. So I'll extend what you're talking about here. We're a couple years into looking at this technology ourselves, but we're actually using it. And it has nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. In fact, I could care less about any cryptocurrency price. I care more about the technology that's being built. That's what's most interesting. And certainly a lot of companies who are part of the $3 billion raised in 2017 are gone, which of course as an enterprise company makes you nervous. What are we going to invest in? I'm going to skip the bets. We're investing, both our time and our money. So I'll just briefly talk about three things. Number one, we have looked and used the code from Bitcoin, Ethereum, IOTA, Hyperledger Fabric. We're a member of Sovereign, which is Hyperledger Indy. We are the 13th node on Hedera Hashgraph. I think it actually might be running. So we're really looking at these technologies. How do they perform? How do the machines run? Do they get hot? Do they get cold? How much traffic do they take? We really want to understand what the technology actually does. So the first thing we're going to launch this year into production is we're digitizing a contract. For those of you familiar with telco, there's roaming. And telcos pay each other every month billions of dollars. And it's super inefficient. And billions and billions of little tiny records are created every day. We're all generating them now as we sit here, right? So we're thinking about digitizing this in a different way. And we want to add trust in the middle of it. So we're starting out by digitizing the contracts between us. And the bits that are financially related can be transactions in a contract, in a network. And it could be almost any network, right? But we want to work with ones that we feel are most trustworthy are going to work. That's one place we're taking it, and that'll be working this year in production between two major telcos. That's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And one second.
And you're not done.
No, just one more quick one. We want to prevent malware attacks, right? All of us have routers at home. We have Android or iPhones. We want to bring the next level of security to it. So we're designing a system where all these devices can constantly tell each other what they're doing. So if a malware attack comes, instantly we can shut it down. So two really practical ways that we're using blockchain ourselves with our partners.
That's awesome, yeah. So just a quick recap, we've heard how blockchain affects the banking sector and how Ripple is revolutionizing it. We've heard from Linda from Deloitte about how it's affecting trade finance. We've heard from Tom from Hedera, the technological layer and how that's working in practical ways. And now we've heard from John from Deutsche Telekom about malware and other practical applications in the telecom sector. The next person I'd like to turn the mic over to is Ibrahim Huseini. Ibrahim, blockchain has frequently been referred to as the antidote to the flaws of venture capital. I know that you've been very vocal about how the VC models have failed addressing climate change, which is your life's work in the private sector. What is the issue and how do you propose that we shift this?
So unfortunately with climate change, we don't have an endless amount of time to refine technology, make it more popular, go through booms and busts and wait for it to become mainstream. We just don't have that kind of time. We have 12 years, I heard earlier today, we have 8 years to halt it and start reversing it. So the IPCC report says we have 12 years, and that's just to keep climate change below 1.5 degrees Celsius, and we're already on a trajectory to do 3 degrees. So what we have to do is we have to invest in low carbon infrastructure. Unfortunately, there's a lot of, in spaces like this, we talk a lot about venture. It's very sexy. Hey, this algae is going to produce oils, it's going to produce carbon, it's going to change the world, and this is all fantastic, except that the planet doesn't have the time frame that it takes to commercialize venture technology. So we at FullCycle are adopting a different model. We're taking what we call market-ready technology, meaning it's already scalable and commercial. It has to have what we call climate-critical scalability, like it has to abate at least 1 gigaton worth of carbon. And then once we identify these technologies in things like water, energy, transportation, then we want to democratize access to these infrastructure technologies, infrastructure projects all over the world, because the returns on infrastructure projects is very predictable. So we want to address the kind of the problem that affects everybody, which is climate change. It's not a wealthy person problem or a poor person problem or a middle class person problem. It's an everybody problem. So everybody should be a stakeholder in the solution, and we are using this technology. I think I was invited to speak here because distributed ledger technology allows us to create a platform for anybody to invest in the transition from high carbon to low carbon, and at any financial level that they are able to participate. And that excites us because it brings forth a world that is a little bit more equitable and that contributes to less economic what's the word? Disparity. Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting. The last climate report that was put out by the Trump administration, of all administration, actually talked about how the lower socioeconomic classes will be affected by climate disasters the worst. We're also facing the worst wealth divide in history. How do you propose that we tackle those two issues, and how are they connected?
Well, so since it's a problem that affects everyone, you can, and the biggest investment opportunity in history is going to be reversing climate change, because it's literally an existential crisis that requires, somebody mentioned $5.6 trillion a year worth of investment every year to reverse it. The IPCC says $1 trillion, we're investing $300 billion a year, so we have a 2/3 deficit as it is. So all of that money has to go into upgrading our 20th century and 19th century water, energy, transportation infrastructure. And since there's going to be a lot of money to be made, why not allow everybody to be an investor in that transition? The technologies are there. They require trillions to roll them out. There's going to be a massive arbitrage and steady income generated from selling energy, recycling water, cleaning water, etc. This is a chance for us to, instead of having that profit from this transition be concentrated again in the top 0.1% and add to the, what was it yesterday we read, 26 billion, 26 people have more money than the bottom 3.8 billion. Yeah. Let's stop contributing to that and giving access to everybody to rise up financially together.
Hear, hear. Thank you. Woo! Yeah, I think that deserves a clap. Thank you so much. The next person I'd love to point to is the organizer, the gracious organizer of this event, Nino, and he's the co-founder of a project called Ledgerstater. I'd love for you to take a moment and just tell everyone about what it is that you're working on.
So, blockchain started out a couple of years ago, seriously, with cryptocurrency, which is just one application. And these particular applications ruined the perception of blockchain, because when you say you work with blockchain, people think you work with cryptocurrency. And the same way that Deloitte publishes a report, McKinsey does too, and they are criticizing the adoption of blockchain. So last year in Davos, everyone's talking about how blockchain is going to change the world in 2018, but that didn't happen. So you have the technology, but you don't have the adoption. And the reason is, it's two parties here. It is the technology guys, the hipsters from Brooklyn in t-shirts that create all this amazing technology. And on the other hand, you have the government, you have the boardroom of companies like large corporations like we have here, that maybe don't understand blockchain. And if you put them in the same room with the hipsters, it's not going to work. They're not going to understand each other, they can't speak the same language, they don't know how to adopt it. So that's where we come into the picture. We are the bridge in between these two guys. We can speak both the hipster language, understand the technology, and we can try to understand government's problems, how to make better citizen services, how to make companies more efficient, to streamline their production or services. So we normally go in and we take a proof of concept approach, where we have a sit down with a government or a large corporation, and before this meeting, we curate technologies. So we make sure we work with the best technologies, like Hedera Hashgraph and other technologies we have in here. And we know what the capacity is. So we sit down with them and we create a proof of concept that makes sense. It's no point adapting blockchain just because it's sexy. It needs to be benefits, right? So that's where we come in. We're trying to be the intermediary, the bridge in between these two camps.
Absolutely. And I believe you and John Abbot have a project together. John, would you like to tell us a little bit about Yoti?
Hi there, John from Yoti. So Yoti is a digital identity app and a global platform. So you create your digital identity from your government-issued passport, driver's license, state ID, something's official. You marry it up with your biometrics from your face using border control, facial recognition. And we run that through some technical analysis and then physical human beings in a room doing your traditional security check. And when you create that digital ID, it's effectively yours. The data is only encrypted with the keys on your phone matched to your face. We can't see or monetize any of your data, so we're a facilitator to create digital IDs for everyone, and it is an everyone problem from that regard as well. Why? Because your investor in the West Coast versus your person in the developing world is all subject to fraud and all subject to having the things they care most about taken away from them. So we're about proving that you are you irrefutably for free. It's a free app for everyone to use.
Do you think one day we will no longer have to stand in customs lines using your technology?
Well, we recently completed a trial at Heathrow Airport. So similarly, you would share your Yoti details matched to your passport with an airline, and they would share that with the infrastructure in the airport. And your face then is your token for your passport and your boarding card combined. So you would stroll straight through the gates with facial recognition. So fingers crossed, you might see that later this year. The project that we've been working on with Ledgerstater Nino for a while has been how do you position the adoption of these technologies, not just digital identity, but into the infrastructure for governments to use. And we've been working both with some European governments and created actually a proof of concept in with Hashgraph-based technology, where I can create that digital identity in 3 to 5 minutes, and then inject that into a wallet-based form for then a blockchain-based system to start utilizing that data. And that enables, quite quickly, if you have old legacy systems, you can quite quickly create a very versatile infrastructure, a few nodes running around the world, then suddenly shows that you can start taking your tax number, your health number, and marry those old disparate accounts up into sort of one seamless new group at a really low cost.
That sounds great. Can you figure out how to track luggage on the blockchain? I know a lot of us have had issues in this room.
We're actually doing a lost and found process at the moment. So you can you do a rewards base, find your luggage in another country. You could scan the QR code in someone's luggage, and a bit like you know, a bit like Uber's going to say, you can add a tip. You can add a reward for returning it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Just want to add real quick. We think identity is like the most crucial thing, and what's real, that's the big paradigm shift, is that we're all going to experience different identity.
Yeah.
I say yes, we'll walk right through airports, but I also think we can walk up to a car and the car door is going to open, turn on your favorite Beatles song, get to 72 degrees, the seat will adjust and you'll sit down and it'll drive you off.
Yeah.
Right? Or you get to a hotel room, same temperature or whatever. Like, because you're gonna hold all your own assets of your identity with you, and the machines will know. So I certainly think we're on that path.
Yes, thank you, John. I'd love to turn over to Henrik von Scheel, who's known as the originator of the Industry 4.0, which is considered a new era of the Industrial Revolution. Am I saying that correctly? So you have a bird's eye view on this whole industry. I'd love to hear from you. What industries are you seeing being affected and disrupted the most in the most pragmatic way by blockchain?
Good question. I actually have 10 minutes for all of you guys where I can go through a certain short pitch. I think there's certain element that we need to cover.
You can't
First,
have 10 minutes.
we need to demystify what is the fourth industrial revolution, and we need to clarify what is blockchain, what is the application to it, and then actually cover it into 3 areas in terms of what is the application, what is the technology set. The technology set is evolving. I mean, like, we are in child mode of blockchain. This is like the first phone we have. We have a battery in our bag, and we are excited that we can communicate from here 10 meters. We are all excited, but we are at the first stages. That means that there are certain steps that are coming. This year will be the big turning point. Blockchain is moving from outside the economic pillars into the economic pillars. That means that it's gonna come into the area of asset-based blockchain. Cryptocurrency was a test case. Black money moving forth and back. A lot of trying to do economic zones and tokens and all these elements. But this year, it's moving into the pillar, disrupting the core element of trading and banking. That means the key element that a bank consists of is disruptive. The key element that a government consists of is disruptive. That means part of what Deloitte is saying, it covers within business, taxes, reporting, information flow, service flow. All of these elements are mature enough to hook directly into the core of elements that a business does. Some of these businesses, they are bigger in revenue generations than a country. So, but they are unsafe. So when you look at blockchain, blockchain comes in 3 different waves. The first wave has already happened. That's digital currency. That's utterly a test case. Some of them will survive. When you look on how many cryptocurrencies there are, 90% of them are in Zug. 90% of all in the world are registered in Zug. That is an inflated air balloon that is about to burst. That means something which is based on trust and it has no asset behind it will burst. If you're not moving to asset-based, it will burst. And it's that simple. Normally what happens in a hype, it follows down, and it follows down to a certain element. The wave that we're in right now, blockchain technology space needs to evolve in 3 stages. And these 3 stages are technology sets that combine the paradigm shift. It needs to connect with artificial intelligence. Why? Because it is the door locker to big data. Not big data in terms of business intelligence, but the big data in terms of connecting data flow, processes, events, roles, processes, all within a supply chain, all within procurement, all within, when you look at organizations today, they are hardwired siloed. The information is not protected. The only elements that you can protect an organization, if you have a legacy system, SAP, then you have probably Oracle HR, so you are a little bit lucky when the information is jumping, but when you do too much integration, you've just spread your legs for to be kicked big time. The only element to secure the promise for blockchain resides in cybersecurity. When artificial intelligence is linked with quantum computing. Quantum computing is 3 sets. There's the quantum computing technology, IBM is leading that space. Then there's the quantum logic. The quantum logic is an element on how you program, how you view, and how you control information. This quantum logic is the only element we have to manage element in real time. Blockchain today is based on historical data. So you're not reacting in real time. So what that actually means, when you're controlling something, everything that we look on, you have an activity in, you have an activity out. Everything we look on in our environment today is output driven. It has already happened. Blockchain holds the promise to do real-time measurements. It also holds the promise for cybersecurity, meaning that we will turn the data of all information to the centerpiece of us. So, and my last point I have, the elements that Nino mentions is quite important. He has 3 elements. One is you have the government element, then you have the citizen element, and then you have the business environment element. So the first focus, the way that blockchain had, was to focus on the citizen has the freedom to rebel against the government, and now we will take it over. In reality, this is not really a reliable model. The way where blockchain is maturing the fastest way right now is moving from governments into business worlds. Why? Governments always follow business world. Why? Governments never take leading practices. Governments never learn out of mistakes. When you do mistakes, you hide them. Businesses, when you do mistakes, you discover, great, I did a mistake, let's improve, let's improve, let's improve. This is the way that we need to collaborate on to the next level. Now, I wanted to add just a final word. I know all of you have dreams and ambitions. You're all here because you love blockchain, you want to do business on blockchain, you want to move on blockchain. Blockchain is a huge potential, but what we need in blockchain, we need skills diversification, we need skills, cross-skills elements to it. We need people that go into artificial intelligence, semantics ontologies. Semantic ontology is a science, an old science, very rarely used in enterprise architecture, in engineering, and enterprise modeling. These 3 disciplines are merging together in one. Artificial intelligence is a paradigm shift of a concept how you program. Blockchain is a paradigm shift on technology set. This is like a wireless element you have. And I know you all know like what blockchain is, so I don't have to explain it to you. But if you want me to explain it to you a simple way, I can explain it in layman's term.
That's okay.
Okay, good.
I think we're all good. Thank you so much, Henrik. Thank you. I think this is probably one of the most impressive panels I've seen and had the pleasure to moderate. We've had such an amazing cross-sector representation, from renewable energy and climate change to finance to trade to telecom to governance models and technology. The one thought that I'd like to leave you guys with, the analogy that I've heard best describe this new industry that we're stepping into, I mean, a lot of people are calling it Web 3.0, but really what internet did for the transfer and the collaboration and co-ownership of information is what we're doing here for the transfer, co-ownership, and collaboration of assets. So anything in this world can now be put on blockchain in some shape or form, which is truly transformative because it takes this internet and puts it into 3D. I'm excited to meet some of you after the panel, so thank you very much for paying attention.